Welcome to the deep dive. Looks like we're diving into Rich Dad, Poor Dad today. Got the stack right here, and, it's definitely a book that gets people talking.
It really does. I mean, Kiyosaki's ideas, they really challenge the way we think about money, what we've been taught.
Yeah, for sure. And he starts right off the bat with this idea of two dads, two perspectives, right? His own father, who he calls Poor Dad, versus his friend's father, the Rich Dad. And both successful in their own ways. But
Like, totally different views on money and how to, define wealth, even.
exactly. So Poor Dad is all about education, right? Get a good education, get a good job. That's the path to security. Work hard, save money.
The traditional route.
Totally. But then you had Rich Dad, who's this entrepreneur, and he sees money as a tool. Not just something you earn, but something you use to create.
Opportunity. Freedom, even.
Right? And this is where Kiyosaki starts talking about financial literacy. Not just earning, but understanding how money works.
Yeah, it's not enough to just have a high income. You need to know how to manage it, invest it, make it work for you.
And he makes this point that, traditional education, it often prepares you to be an employee, not necessarily.
An entrepreneur. Or an investor.
Right. Which kind of leads into this whole rat race concept, which I got to admit, when I first read that, it was like, well, whoa, is that me?
I think a lot of people feel that way.
So break it down for us. What is the rat race exactly, according to Kiyosaki?
So it's this cycle, right? You work, you earn money, you pay taxes, and then what's left, you spend it on stuff you think are assets.
But might not be.
Exactly. So you're always working, always spending, but never really getting ahead.
Okay, so he's messing with our definitions here because, we're taught that, owning a house, that's an asset, Gene, right? Building a secure future.
Right. And this is where things get interesting because Kiyosaki, he says, hold on, is your house really putting money in your pocket or is it taking money out?
Wait, so you're saying my house isn't an asset? But isn't that like the American dream, owning a home? I'm confused, and I bet our listener is too. Help us out.
He's not saying it's bad to own a home. But for a lot of people, it's actually a liability. Think about it. You got your mortgage, property taxes, insurance, repairs, all that stuff. Money going out every month.
Okay, yeah, I see his point. But then how do you escape this rat race? How do you start building real assets the Kiyosaki way?
Well, he talks about minding your own business, which doesn't necessarily mean
quitting your job and starting a company.
Right, not necessarily. It's more about creating another income stream, building what he calls an asset column alongside your job.
This reminds me of what he says about Ray Kroc, the McDonald's guy. It wasn't the burgers, it was the real estates, owning the land under those franchises.
Exactly. It's about thinking differently, seeing opportunities that maybe other people miss. So that asset column, it could be real estate, stocks, businesses, anything that generates income without you directly trading your time for it.
And he's big on owning your own corporation, right? For the tax advantages, legal protection.
Yeah, he goes into how corporations have been used throughout history, by the wealthy to kind of right, understanding the system and using it to your advantage.
Okay, but building wealth, it's not exactly a walk on the park, right? If it were that easy.
We'd all be millionaires.
Exactly. And Kiyosaki, he's pretty upfront about the challenges. In fact, he lists 5 reasons why people get stuck in that rat race, calls them obstacles to building wealth. What's the first one we tackle?
Fear. And I think that's something everyone can relate to. Fear of losing money, fear of failing, fear of the unknown.
He even tells that story about the Texas go broke big mentality. Remember that?
Yeah, how they see failure as just part of the process, a chance to, learn and come back stronger.
Totally different mindset. Okay, so fear is the first hurdle. What else is on Kiyosaki's list?
Cynicism. Those people always negative, always shooting down new ideas, especially when it comes to money.
It'll never work crowd.
Exactly. Kiyosaki says winners analyze, cynics criticize. Winners look for solutions, cynics focus on the problems, and they'll always find a reason why something won't work.
It's almost like they're scared to succeed. Okay, fear, cynicism, is laziness in there too.
Oh, absolutely. And not just, physically lazy. It's more like disguised as busyness, so busy with their lives they don't make time for
their financial education.
Right. Don't put in the effort to build that asset column.
I've been there, running around like crazy, but not really moving forward.
Kiyosaki says a little greed can be good motivation. Not greed in a bad way, but that desire for a better life. Use it to fuel your learning, your growth.
Okay, I like that. Harness that energy. All right, fear, cynicism, laziness. What are the last 2 obstacles we got to knock down?
That habit, and specifically the habit of paying yourself last. Most people, they pay their bills, their expenses, and then whatever's left. Maybe they save or invest a little.
Kiyosaki says flip that script, right? Then pay yourself first, even before the bills. I remember reading that and thinking, whoa, is that even allowed?
Definitely a different way of thinking. But his point is, If you wait till the end, there's often nothing left. You got to prioritize your financial future.
Make it a non-negotiable. Okay, and the fifth, final obstacle.
Arrogance, this one's sneaky. Thinking you know it all, refusing to learn from others.
Oh yeah, I know that. Too smart for their own good.
Exactly. And that closes you off to new ideas, new opportunities. Kiyosaki was all about being open to learning, constantly expanding your knowledge.
So we've got the two dads, the rat race, assets versus liabilities, and now these 5 obstacles. This is great stuff. Where do we go from here? What else does Kiyosaki have in store for us? So we talk about the obstacles, but Kiyosaki doesn't just leave us hanging there, right? He gives us a way to actually, deal with all this and start building wealth. And I'm thinking about those 10 steps to awaken your financial genius.
Yeah, he doesn't just point out the problems, he gives you the tools to fix them. And the 10 steps, they're like a roadmap.
I gotta admit, when I first saw that list, I was kind of overwhelmed. 10 steps. Where do you even begin?
I get it, it can seem like a lot, but if you break it down step by step, Kiyosaki makes it pretty clear. And the first one is all about finding mentors. He talks about how his rich dad was his mentor, teaching him about money, and how that helped him develop his, financial intelligence.
That makes me think, what if our listener doesn't have a rich dad in their life? Where do they find those mentors?
Mentorship can come from anywhere. It could be a successful business person they admire, a financial advisor, even someone online sharing good financial advice.
So you're saying it doesn't have to be this, formal relationship. You can find mentors in all sorts of places.
Exactly. Even reading books by successful investors or, listening to podcasts like this one can be a form of mentorship. It's about surrounding yourself with people and resources that can help you learn and grow.
So finding mentors, that's step 1. What about step 2? What's next on Kiyosaki's list?
Mastering a formula. He's big on finding an investment strategy that works for you and then becoming an expert at it. Like, he learned how to buy foreclosed properties and turn them into rentals.
So it's not about trying to do everything at once. It's about focusing on one thing and getting really good at it.
Right. But then he takes it a step further. He says once you've mastered a formula, you need to find a faster one.
Always innovating, always pushing the boundaries. That's very entrepreneurial, isn't it? Okay, so we've got finding mentors, mastering a formula, and then finding a faster one. What else is in those 10 steps?
The rest of the steps cover a lot of ground, from overcoming your fears to managing your money better. He even talks about giving back, using your wealth to make a positive impact on the world.
I remember that part of the book really stood out to me. It's not just about making money for yourself, it's about using it to help others.
Exactly. And he even argues that giving back can bring more abundance into your life. It's a concept a lot of successful people believe in.
So he's really encouraging people to think about wealth in a holistic way. It's not just about the numbers, it's about your mindset, your values, your impact. It's pretty inspiring, actually. But I'm also thinking about our listener, the person who's really digging into Rich Dad, Poor Dad with us. How do they actually apply those 10 steps to their own life? It can seem kind of abstract, right?
It's true, you have to kind of adapt it to your own situation. But let's try to make it a little more concrete.
Perfect. I think that would be super helpful for our listeners. So let's take each step one by one and brainstorm some actionable ideas that people can actually implement in their lives.
All right, sounds good. We've already talked about finding mentors. So if you're feeling stuck, think about someone you admire who's financially successful. What's one question you could ask them this week to learn from their journey?
You could send an email, reach out on social media.
Right. You'd be surprised how many successful people are willing to share their knowledge and advice.
That's a great tip. Be proactive, take initiative. Don't wait for opportunities to come to you. Okay, what about step 2, mastering a formula? What's an actionable idea for that one?
Well, think about what you're interested in, what you're good at. Is there an area of investing that excites you? Maybe real estate or stocks or starting an online business. Pick one area and commit to learning everything you can about it.
So you're saying find your niche, right? And then really go deep on it.
Exactly. Become an expert in your chosen area. Read books, take courses, find a mentor who's already successful in that field. The key is to focus your energy and avoid getting distracted by every new trend that pops up.
Focus is key, especially when you're starting out. Okay, so we've got finding mentors and mastering a formula. What about step 3, finding a faster formula? That one sounds kind of intense.
It is. It's about constantly pushing yourself to improve, to innovate. Once you've had some success with one strategy, don't just sit back and relax. Ask yourself, how can I do this better? How can I scale this? Can I automate any of this?
Always be optimizing, right? Like Kiyosaki himself, He started with real estate, but then he branched out into business and education, always evolving, always looking for new opportunities.
Right. He's a great example of that, and that's what he wants his readers to do too. Always be learning, always be growing.
Okay, so far so good. We got some really solid, actionable ideas for our listener. Let's keep going with the 10 steps. What's next on the list?
Step 4 is all about overcoming your doubts and fears. Kiyosaki knows that this is often the biggest hurdle for people. They're scared of making mistakes, of losing money, of failing.
Yeah, I think we all struggle with self-doubt. Sometimes it can be so paralyzing, especially when it comes to money. So what's the antidote? What does Kiyosaki suggest we do about it?
He says we need to change the way we think about failure. He sees it as a necessary part of learning. You haven't truly learned something until you've made a mistake and learned from it.
I'm thinking about a time when I took a financial risk and it totally backfired. Lost some money, and it definitely hurt. But looking back, I learned so much from that experience.
That's exactly what he's talking about, and it highlights how important mindset is. It's not just about having the right knowledge or skills, it's about having the right attitude.
He says our thoughts can become self-fulfilling prophecies. If you believe you're going to fail, you probably will. But if you believe you can succeed, you're way more likely to take risks and push through those tough times.
And that's where step 5 comes in, having a clear vision for your financial future. Kiyosaki says create a vision board or write down your financial goals in detail. Make those dreams as real as possible.
Love that idea. It's like creating a roadmap for your financial journey. And when you have that clear destination in mind, it's easier to stay motivated and make good choices.
Exactly. It's about knowing where you want to go and then consistently taking action to get there. And that brings us to step 6, taking action. Kiyosaki's big on the idea that knowledge without action is useless.
He's got that great quote, something like, "You can't shrink your way to greatness."
That's the one. He's all about taking bold action, even if it's scary or uncomfortable. He wants people to set aside time each day to work on their financial goals. It could be reading a book, researching investments, building a business, anything that moves you forward.
Make it a priority. Don't just squeeze it in when you have a free minute. Make it a non-negotiable part of your day. Okay, so we've covered finding mentors, mastering a formula, overcoming your doubts, having a clear vision, and taking action. What about step 7?
Step 7 is about paying yourself first. We touched on this earlier, but it's worth repeating. Most people pay their bills and expenses first, and then whatever's left, they might save or invest a little.
Kiyosaki says that's backwards. He says pay yourself first, even if it's just a small amount. Make it a habit, and over time, those small amounts will add up.
Exactly. It's about creating a system where you're automatically investing in your future before anything else. It takes discipline, but it's so powerful.
Okay, so we've got finding mentors, mastering a formula, overcoming your doubts, having a clear vision, taking action, and paying yourself first. We're making good progress through these 10 steps. What's next?
Step 8 is all about learning from the rich. Kiyosaki believes that wealthy people think and act differently than those who struggle financially. He says, study their habits, their strategies.
Surround yourself with successful people. Learn from their experiences. Model their behaviors.
Exactly. Find role models who can inspire you and show you what's possible.
I think that's something a lot of people miss. We tend to learn from the people we're closest to, but if they're not financially successful, we might be picking up bad habits without even realizing it.
That's a great point. Be intentional about who you spend time with. Seek out mentors and role models who can help you level up your financial game. Okay, 2 more steps to go. What's number 9?
I'm ready. Hit me with step 9.
Now, step 9 is all about developing your financial IQ. It's more than just knowing how to budget and save. It's about understanding investing, taxes, how to analyze financial statements.
Become a financial whiz.
Exactly. A sophisticated investor who can make smart decisions about their money.
And I bet that ties into step 10, right? And putting all that knowledge into action, making your money work for you.
You got it. The final step is all about using everything you've learned to create a life of financial freedom. It's about building a portfolio of assets that generate income, whether it's real estate, stocks, businesses, whatever works for you.
It's about flipping the script, right? Instead of you working for money, your money works for you.
Exactly. It's about achieving that financial independence that allows you to live life on your own terms.
That's what it's all about. And Kiyosaki makes it clear, this isn't just about hoarding money. It's about having the freedom to do what you love, spend time with the people you care about, make a difference in the world.
Live a life with purpose, with meaning. That's what Rich Dad, Poor Dad is really about. It's powerful stuff.
It really is. So we've unpacked those 10 steps to awaken your financial genius. Finding mentors, mastering a formula, overcoming doubts, having a vision, taking action, paying yourself first, learning from the rich, boosting your financial IQ, and then putting it all into practice. That's a lot to take in. What are your overall thoughts? Are Kiyosaki's ideas realistic? Can the average person actually achieve this?
That's the big question, right? And there's definitely been a lot of debate about that over the years. Some people love Kiyosaki, some people hate him.
He's a polarizing figure for sure.
But there's no question he's gotten people thinking about money in a new way. He's challenging those traditional ideas about working for money, paying taxes, accumulating debt.
He's offering an alternative path, one that emphasizes financial literacy, entrepreneurship, building those income-generating assets.
Right. And maybe his ideas aren't for everyone, but I think there's something valuable in his message for anyone who wants to improve their financial situation.
I think if there's one thing everyone takes away from Rich Dad, Poor Dad, it's that financial literacy is so important.
Yeah, you gotta know how money works if you want to build wealth. That's like Kiyosaki's whole thing.
And it's not just about, budgeting and saving. It's deeper than that.
It's about investing, taxes, understanding cash flow, all that stuff.
Being financially savvy, not just, responsible.
And you gotta be proactive about it. It's not always something you learn in school or from your family.
He's all about, reading books, going to seminars, finding mentors who've been there, done that.
Exactly. Find those people who are already successful and learn from them.
So if our listeners feeling lost, maybe a good place to start is picking up a personal finance book or finding an investing group in their area.
Tons of resources out there. Okay, but it's not just about knowledge, right? Kiyosaki also talks a lot about mindset.
Oh yeah, huge on mindset. Your thoughts create your reality, all that.
If you're walking around thinking you're bad with money or you'll never be rich, well,
you're probably right, yeah. But
if you start believing in yourself that you can create abundance,
they start to shift.
It's big time. And this is where I think the cash flow quadrant comes in.
Oh yeah, that's a classic Kiyosaki concept. Can you break that down for our listeners who might not be familiar?
Sure. So it's this model, right? It divides people into 4 categories based on how they make their money.
Employees, self-employed, business owners, and investors.
And Kiyosaki says most people are stuck in that employee or self-employed category where they're trading their time for money.
Working hard, but not necessarily building wealth.
Right. So he wants people to move into those other 2 quadrants, business owner or investor, where you can create passive income.
Income that keeps coming in, even when you're not actively working.
Exactly. You go from being a consumer to a producer.
This might be a good time to bring up Kiyosaki's views on homeownership. That's something he gets a lot of heat for.
Yeah, he's famous for saying a house isn't an asset.
But I think people sometimes miss his point.
He's not saying don't buy a house necessarily.
Or about, is your house making you money or costing you money?
For a lot of people, it's the latter, right? Mortgage payments, taxes, repairs.
It's a liability, not an asset, in his view.
If you want to build wealth, focus on things that generate like rental properties, businesses, stocks.
The house could be a great place to live, but it's not always the best investment.
Definitely something to think about, for sure.
Okay, another big takeaway from Rich Dad, Poor Dad is just that take action.
Yeah, all the knowledge in the world won't do you any good if you don't actually do something with it.
You can read all the books, go to all the seminars,
but if you don't actually implement what you're learning,
it's all for nothing.
So let's give our listeners something concrete they can do today. One action they can take to get closer to their financial goals.
Okay, I like that. What do you suggest?
Well, it depends on their situation, of course. But if they're in debt, they could make a plan to pay it off. Or if they don't have an emergency fund, start setting some money aside each month.
If they're interested in investing, open a brokerage account, start reacting.
Even a small step is better than nothing. The important thing is to just get started.
And remember, building wealth, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
It takes time, consistency, and a willingness to keep learning and growing.
Well, I think that about wraps up our deep dive into Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
We've covered a lot of ground, from assets and liabilities to financial education and mindset.
We've talked about Kiyosaki's strategies, those obstacles to success, and the importance of taking action.
Hopefully this has given our listeners some food for thought.
And maybe even inspired them to take control of their financial future.
Now, as you go about your day, here's something to think about.
What would you be doing if money were no object?
Let that question guide you on your journey to financial freedom.